kind introduction, an effusive one. And so yes, Nursey, John, other people, they actually tracked me down in early 2000. In those days, to just find the email was something. And I was still at UCLA coming over here. And they were very gracious, welcomed me very well. And in those days, there was no consulate over here, other things. So, you know, I was coming from LA where I was not used to interaction with people being nice to you, you know. Exactly. But this is, you know, the Southern hospitality with the Indian hospitality mixed in. It was kind of like, what's wrong with these people? You know, it's like, why are they so? But then you come over here, you realize it's a very different world. It takes you a little bit of time to settle in. Then you settle in and you realize that things are changing. For example, when I heard your introductions, I was going to say, do we have anybody from manufacturing over here? And finally we had one. So just to give you an example, if you were looking at the US economy, just even 20 years ago, at least 2 in 10 people over here would be connected to manufacturing. Now it's like 1 in 30 over here. In data is 1 in, actually it's 1 in 15. And here we have higher concentration of technology related to either healthcare or financial side, which when I look at the data, shows up in numbers as like total overall as 1 in 10, but here is like almost 80%. So this is how quickly the landscape is changing, has changed. And my job is to educate through my conferences, which happen every quarter, about what's happening in the world economy, in the national economy, and also in the local economy with the connections. And where are we going? So where are we going? The exact numbers you will get at the conference on August 27th, right? But there should be enough hints and discussion. I'm also here to learn what are your concerns and other things. For example, I just got an email this morning from Channel 11 where they had a good question. Because I've been writing on my Facebook and Twitter about Greece. And my philosophy about the Greece is that they are going to leave the Eurozone, but that is very clear. When that will happen is a little bit of a question mark, but it's going to happen. The issue is what after that? And my hypothesis is that once they leave the Eurozone, they will have to leave the European Union too. I tell you why, it's political. Because in the European Union, which they are remember, Eurozone is a subset of European Union. Of the countries in the European Union who use the currency is the Eurozone. So leaving the currency is not a big deal. But if they are kicked out, and you are part of a European Union member, and you have to now pass a resolution against sanctions against Russia, do any tax treaty or any tax change or anything, you don't need a majority vote. You need a unanimous consent of the European Union members. Unanimous, not a single dissent.
Really?
Yes. So that is why Germany will pony up the money to keep them in, because if you kick them out of the Eurozone, you better kick them out of the European Union too. You don't want to have a mad, angry member who's going to now block you. That's why you can understand why Tsipras used to go all the time to Russia. That was the only leverage he had, and of course, messed up the country. The banking system is in shambles. If you're a banker, you're just looking at that and saying, this is like shooting yourself in the foot with 2 AK-47 blazing full scale, you know. It's like, they just destroyed it. It's basically done. They're just hanging it. But the question was, what are the implications to the profitability and working of the companies in Atlanta? Right? Greece is Greece, right? They will take care of that thing. They will find a nice lawyer who will figure out how to get them out of the European Union. Laws are made by human beings. If there's no provision, well, make a new law. This is the problem. But what's the implication over here? So the first is, as there are problems in Europe, what's going to happen? The US dollar will become strong, which means you're planning a vacation in Europe right now, you already have a 10% advantage compared to just a couple of months ago. And of course, a 40% advantage compared to a year. I mean, euro to dollar was about $1.40 just about a year or so ago. Now it's $1.08, getting to parity. So what's the implication to you? Which means that, let's say you're German Chamber of Commerce over here and your job is to help in companies that are trying to leave Germany to settle over here. Why were they trying to leave the Germany? Because the dollar was so weak, relatively speaking, that if you were a German BMW selling a car over here, you were getting killed in the currency transaction. There's only so much of hedging you can do, you know. So what do? You put your product over here. That's where you can understand why the foreign plants of both Toyota and other people are coming over here. Because they say, I need to be where my customer is, right? Car companies have realized that. I need to be where my customer is. Okay. So weak dollar means more companies will come over here. That means a strong dollar means that the incentive for them to come over here can become a little bit less. But here's another negative. If you're selling your services to Europe and your price is now higher because the dollar is stronger, you know basic law of economics, even when you're in the back bench or the front bench, you're awake enough to know that when the price goes up, quantity comes down. He thought I was sitting in the front bench. We were in a college, we're coming in 5 minutes late. This is not, hearing in the US is what we need. The doors will be closed right on the time. It's an auditorium of 150 people in a class. The doors are closed by the teacher exactly at 9 o'clock. And if you are coming in after that, you are the bad person opening the door and everybody can see it. And I consistently came at 9:05. So I had to sit in the back. Now you can't go to the front because you're gonna get chewed out if you sit in the front. So anyway, so coming back to Europe versus US things, so this is the impact of Greece on the negative side this way. But what's the positive one? Well, the stock market goes into gyrations, so that's not good because volatility in the stock market is not good for business. Whether it's your own portfolio or your personal portfolio, it's not okay. But if you're holders of bonds, which most of the people these days don't hold bonds, right? Bonds are for old people. Everybody's into stocks, borrow. So if you're holders of bonds, it's called flight to safety. When the money leaves the European system and comes over here, it goes into two things. Number one, into bonds, treasury market, not corporate, but treasury. And number two, followed by real estate. A lot of the buildings owned in this town, built in this town, but are owned by German, Dutch, Italian, Chinese investors, your trophy properties. So, when there's a flight to safety, initially it goes into a very safe thing, like the treasury bonds, and then it comes out to get invested in real estate. So those guys are a little bit happy. Their marketing arms in Europe are raking in money. So there's always that, who is benefiting? But overall, dollar getting stronger gets a little bit negative, but here's the good part. Do we run a surplus in this country on the trade side? No. We run a deficit, right? Deficit always means that somebody is financing you, by definition. When China sells more to us and buys less from us, they actually have loaned us the money and given us the goods too. We got two things. We got their stuff and we also got their money. So, as the dollar gets stronger and the Chinese are looking to invest, and they will not touch Europe right now. Nobody's going to touch Europe. So all of a sudden, the complaints about a few years ago that we're running such big deficit, both fiscal and this thing, and our currency is going to go down and all those concerns are taken care of. Dollar is king again. So financially, that money comes in, and you know it's going to come in to get invested in both stock market and the bond market and the real estate. So there's always positives and negatives, and overall, this is immaterial. But if you are a company in Atlanta who has a lot of trade relationships with Europe, not with Greece, yes, we have no relationship with trade, but we have it in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, you are a bit concerned because Europe is now a bit of a basket case. economically. Okay. Then we move on to the other thing, which is China. Now, when I started in this business in 1996 at UCLA under a Texan, and if you know Texans, the world is centered in Texas, right?
The boss around Texas.
So, my boss, long live, he said, look, we are the 800-pound gorilla. And for him, China was what I call butt of the jokes. Like, he was himself older. He says, how do we solve the baby boomer problem of aging? We don't have enough young people and we are aging, and boomers take up all this Medicare and Medicaid and all this stuff. And so he himself was a boomer, right? I mean, he was quite close to retirement. So I said, I got a solution to that problem. Ship boomers to China. And I used to debate with him, okay, today is a communist country and all that, so they can clean the dirty laundry, but in 20 years from now, they will be much different and they won't be able to do this job. Then what? So, oops, I don't care, I'll be done and gone by that time. So now comes in 20 years later, and I started noticing that in about 2003 and 4. Not very clear, you start feeling it. It's called that gut feeling and all that things are changing. And China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 late, and by the full effect started coming in 2003. And by 2008, when the financial crisis happened, and afterwards, I realized things had changed. I cannot now do a US forecast without only looking at us and a little bit of Europe. The world has changed. I need to worry about the health of China. So I was putting that in my talks and everything, and suddenly, about a year and a half ago, I said, let me quantify this thing. I'm an academic too. It's okay to talk about gut feelings, but let's get the numbers. So when I sat down with a grad student, we did this paper about trade relationship of China. I was not surprised, but sometimes I was shocked at the numbers that were coming up. So let me just ask you a simple question. Japan and Korea are two developed economies, right? Do you agree? Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you a number that in 2000, about 5% of their total exports were going to China. What is that number right now, ballpark? 10 years later. 30%. Let me give you some examples. Australia. Trade with China was 3% 15 years ago, it's 40% now. Where do they buy their iron ore, other stuff? Chile, 40% copper. Brazil, 20%. Kazakhstan. I love to put that up. I know where Kazakhstan is. My geography teacher made sure in India I knew where Kazakhstan was. And we all know where Australia is in India because of the rivers Murray and Darling, and you know what the joke is. Right? So, Kazakhstan is sending 50% of its exports to China. What does Kazakhstan have that you sell to China? Oil. You start looking at any country in the world except us and Germany and France and some European developed ones. Everybody has a trade relationship of 20% plus with China. But China is now the factory of the world. Where is all the goods over here made? You know? I'm saying, go back to 1998, the first time I got a Chinese-made gift was I gave a speech for Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce in LA. And they gave me a nice clock. You know, a big round clock, that thing. And I looked at it and said, good, but a little bit flimsy for the American stuff. What is it? I mean, first thing, I turned it over, it said made in China. So it was gag gifts and all that at that time. By 2003, if you notice, things were everywhere. If you go to Home Depot, get the tools, they're made in China. Now, we take it for granted. Because anything we know, it's going to be made, most likely, cheaper stuff in China. Even high-level stuff. I found out one of the jackets that I bought in Gap, a leather jacket in the late 90s, which I thought was either European-made or American-made. I looked at the label recently, it was made in China. Okay, things were coming in. So China is now the factory of the world. It produces for the consumption for the West. Between Europe and the US, 50% of the world consumption is these two entities, right? So they produce it, we buy it. But they don't have everything, right? Do they have all the corn, soybean? They buy it from the others. So when China is not doing too well, which means its customers are not buying that much. So you can understand now, if Europe, 25% of the consumption of the world is not doing well, it's not going to buy much from China, which means it's not going to buy much from Chile, Australia, stuff like that. Luckily, we only sell about 7% to China of our total exports. So we can live with that. Fluctuations in there, we can live with it. We cannot live without the fluctuations to Europe, which is 25% of our exports. So the second and third round effects, which were essentially unknown in the 90s, you know, we call rounding errors are not rounding errors anymore. So your portfolio, when you have diversified, and you said, let me buy Brazil, let me buy Australia, let me buy Chile and all that, you basically made a bet on China, and you have no control over it. Luckily, India is not as connected to China on that thing. The trade relationship is not as strong. But we are also big buyers from China. We are not a big sellers over there. So luckily, we benefit on the buying, but not on the other things. When you are not buying as much from China, but selling more over there, that's when it becomes a problem. So now, in the last few months, commodity prices have tanked, right? Whether it's oil, recently it's gold, which is very surprising. It's like the Indian monsoon is still looking okay and the gold demand is down. What does it tell you? And suddenly you realize one thing. This is now Facebook and Twitter and the cell phone economy, right? Do you know that Apple produced 92% of the world profits in the cell phone business? Okay, so this is a nice cell phone. 10 years ago, we didn't have these things, right? We had those fiddly cell phones. The circuitry behind that, your technical people, you know, involves gold and silver. So when the demand for gold goes down, the price of the gold goes down, my first reaction is not about the safe haven issue. Grandpa thought it was a safe haven. It is an industrial issue. Demand for metal down means China is selling less. That means somebody else is buying less. Think it this way. Start thinking that way. It still is a second round effect, but it's not a rounding error anymore. So right now, when I look at the global economy, these two sides are shaky, Europe and China, right? So when we come back to our domestic economy, it depends upon domestic factors. Okay. The US economy runs off the domestic factors. But the second round and the third round effects are negative for companies that are more internationally oriented. If you were a person selling food in downtown Atlanta, your market is 100% domestic. Even though the company's executives' pay raises and ability to hire depend upon the international side, but in the short run is domestic. And over there, the consumer has become very, as I call, un-American over here. The American consumer was not known for his frugality the way when I did my regression equations in the 90s and the early 2000s. But after the 2008-9 financial crisis, the consumer has become very savvy or rational, or is following the principles of economics that they were taught to us, income effects, substitution effect, wealth effect. It's very clear. So right now, the consumer of the US now, compared to 10 years ago, is very much dependent upon the wealth effect. How's the portfolio doing? In the old days, just 10 years ago, as I call the old days, the portfolio was basically real estate. Value of the house, predominantly. A little bit this. House is not the piggy bank anymore, right? Home values are going up, right? Newspaper every day says the home values are going up. But here's the proof of the pudding. Can you monetize it? Can you go to the bank and say, hey, AJC says home prices are up, so can you up my home equity limit? You know, I tell you, hey, don't let the door hit you on the way out. It's a Texas expression I learned in LA. So I don't know if it's American or Texan, but that's what I learned. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Huh?
American.
It's American. I thought it was
Georgia
Texas.
too, Georgia.
I thought it was Texan, you know. So the only thing you can monetize very quickly is your stock market gains. Right? Consumer does that. And the phenomenal run-up in the stock market from the low point of April 2009 till 5 years later, basically quadrupling, reflated the portfolios of the people, which they have used to buy stuff. But this year, in the last 12 months, has the stock market gone up or sideways? It's a trick question. And you're technology people, so you can answer that. No. If you're in NASDAQ, Google, Apple, it's up. If your average portfolio, standard portfolio, it is sideways. You put in Google versus S&P, it's day and night difference, right? NASDAQ versus S&P, NASDAQ is up about 12% this year, and the S&P is flat. But tell me, the average person, unlike the person over here, is it more tech heavy or is it more regular person? It's regular. So their ability to spend now fluctuates every month depending upon what the mood is, how much money it is. Income growth is there, but it's not very strong. So it's there. So that comes to the next question that is always, it's not on your mind that much, but I have to deal with the other audiences too, manufacturing one too and all that, and the financial ones. When will the Fed raise the rates? Do the issues in China and Greece impact the Fed decision? The answer is no, it doesn't. They are mandated to look at the domestic economy. There are the second, third order effects, but they can never mention it publicly. They can give it an oblique reference, export growth is weak. That's all they can say. Otherwise, the Congress will revoke their charter. But they have to be cognizant. So they look at the domestic side. In the domestic side, they were beginning to get confident and they were thinking of moving in September. Not according to me. To me, it's the earliest is December, and that to a ceremonial hike and a little bit more. So, but it makes a difference. If the market believes that they will move in September and they will be a little bit more aggressive, then the dollar starts strengthening right now. More. Okay? So it's bad news for the companies that are trying to sell, but it's good news for the stock market because as the dollar gets stronger, the Europeans would like to invest over here. And it doesn't matter if the stock market even goes down, as long as the dollar becomes more stronger, they have positive gains and they take it back. So strong dollar is good news for the stock market, which becomes good news for the consumer down the road. So that's why when the Fed will move, becomes immaterial to your day-to-day functioning, but becomes material to the wealth effect that I was talking about. I don't think so they're going to move. Right now, to me, if I look at outside the US, 75% of the world economy is flat or declining. That's the nicest assessment I can make about the global economy. If you get me 2 drinks down, I will tell you what it is in different words, okay? That said, it comes back to domestic. Now in the domestic, the biggest thing is job growth, right? So finally, after the 2008-9 recession, when it was over, about 4 years later, your kids moved out of the basement, right? They finally got their own spot after getting a job. The first one. You're waiting for the second one to move out now. And that is where the job growth numbers in the last 6 months have been about 20% weaker than they were in 2014. So that's why I'm saying the Fed won't move. Businesses have to invest. They are dealing with the uncertainty of international stock market, this. They have pulled back on opening the spigot, which we call investment or CapEx spending. Okay? So if they don't come back into the game this quarter, June, July, August, and by October, they have to make the plans for the next year in the big companies, in the Fortune 500 and all that, They usually do their plans twice a year, and October is the next time. The chances look a little bit less that they're going to be opening the spigot. But things can change very quickly too. This Greece thing could be over in 5 more days, and then they're back to the normal. So that is my concern. I need to see visible signs of investment, which tells me the job growth down the road, which tells me your purchasing power, and in the stock market, and I can tell you 9 months from now how the economy will do. And I'm seeing maintenance of what it is right now, no acceleration. With that said, I will open to questions. You will have specific ones, I'm happy to answer it.